Okay, we are live.
Okay, welcome to the LibertyCon Africa 20. So I'm going to teach you a bit of Swahili, and I will greet you in Swahili, which is wapendwa watazamaji na wasikilizaji masalkheri. So this is, I greet you all, our beloved viewers and listeners, good evening. The LibertyCon is brought to you by Students for Liberty, which is a global network of leaders advancing liberty in all aspects of society. We support liberty for all people and encourage debate on the differing philosophies that underlie liberty. Students for Liberty endorses economic freedom, individual freedom, and academic freedom, which are principles that comprise liberty. While giving his keynote address at our conference in DC, Steve Jobs said, and I quote, "At LibertyCon, you will find an international network of people who are achieving remarkable success in advocating free speech and promoting the principles of free market." I further quote our mentor and great economist, Professor George Ayite from Ghana, who baptized the active youth of Africa as the Cheetah Generation. We here at African Students for Liberty are members of the Cheetah Generation, committed to correcting the wrongs of our forefathers and generations before us by calling out the faults and bringing forth solutions that will lead us to our desired Africa, which is beautiful, peaceful, and prosperous, where there is no more poverty and suffering. Our continent is filled with so many atrocities, and we are commonly referred to as being poor. In the wake of coronavirus pandemic, ours wasn't a beginning of infections and mass deaths, but a beginning of police brutality as they enforced government measures to stop the spread of the deadly virus. Instead of doctors in the streets, it was police with clubs and guns in Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Nigeria, among many others. And the result was loss of life and scores wounded as our people scampered to run home from work.
We can achieve that one.
Our brothers and sisters in Nigeria are out protesting right now to end SARS, a police service unit that targets young Nigerians under the false pretense of fighting crime. But the reality is severe extortion, harassment, and even death. And have you heard about what is happening in Congo? There is a silent Holocaust ongoing as millions of people are forced into slavery and killed. Multinationals are invading Congo to mine the gold of our modern day age, which is coltan, this being a critical mineral needed for electronic devices. Congo is bleeding. I urge you to stand counted among us as the Cheetah Generation. Your voice is stronger than you can imagine, and it is the tool to bring change. Speak out, resist the urge to conform to corruption and cronyism. Stand with truth for the sake of a freer Africa that is home to all of us. Check out our website as Students for Liberty on how to be involved with the work that we're doing around Africa and around the world. Thank you so very much for joining us for our inaugural LibertyCon Africa conference that has brought together people from over 50 countries across Africa and the rest of the world to debate the critical issues affecting us and forge free market-based solutions for them. We have lined up expert speakers who shall be speaking to us during the panel session. Stay tuned from today up to our last session on Friday. Ask questions, invite your friends, and do not forget to share your takeaway on social media. Now, our official hashtag for the conference is LibertyCon Africa 20, and we will be so glad if you can share posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and any other social media platforms with that hashtag. Thank you so very much, and you're very welcome to the LibertyCon Africa conference. So we're gonna go right into it. Our speakers are already here, and I'm going to invite our moderator for this panel, who is Burugu Babu from Kenya. You're very welcome. The stage is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Linda, and hello, guys from the East Coast or from Eastern Africa, from the capital city of Kenya. I'm joining you. My name is Burugu Babu. I am a regional coordinator with Students for Liberty in charge of Kenya and Somalia. I also act as the academic programs lead at African Students for Liberty, and I'm also doubling up as the Tech Liberty Campaign coordinator for the African region. Up and about that, professionally, I'm a policy analyst, and it gives me much joy to be joined by other knowledgeable panelists as we discuss the first session of this LibertyCon, which is COVID Millionaires. So COVID Millionaires is a tag that has been coined by media houses, and we are talking about the looting of COVID-19 management funds by corrupt officials. We've heard of these cases from South Africa to Kenya to Nigeria to Ghana, and COVID-19 came at a very it was an emergency, a pandemic, and there was an influx of grants to Africa in the advent of the pandemic, because there were questions of how will Africa, which is in the global south, manage a pandemic that was killing people in their thousands in the West. How would Africa manage to manage a pandemic with its broken health system? So there was an influx of grants that came, and then from foreign aid to private donations, there was so much donations that came in. But now the question comes in: are we able to see the amounts or are we able to see the value of the money that was used? Are we able to see where this money went? Was there value for money? Did who we call in Kenya in Swahili common mwananchi, the common citizen, were they able to feel the effect of these aids? Or did this money just go to create millionaires and billionaires in Africa? So, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm joined by a very interesting and knowledgeable panel. We have Phumlani Majozi, who joins us from South Africa. Phumlani is a business and macroeconomics analyst, a writer, and a commentator on economic, political, and global issues. So Phumlani is well poised to discuss with us the issue of looting, the looting of funds meant for COVID-19. Phumlani has been a contributor on media outlets such as News24, which is South Africa's leading news website. He has been published in the City Press, Biz News, African Liberty, and Politics Web. So Phumlani is a senior fellow at African Liberty, and he is celebrated, and he's in 2016 and 2017, he was selected by Avance Media as one of the 100 most influential young South Africans under the social enterprise and philanthropy category and law and governance category. So I'm going to give Phumlani 2 minutes to say hi to our audience today.
Thank you so much for me. I'm excited to talk about a very big that we which we saw reaching extremes over the past months. The continent was battling COVID-19, the pandemic. So I'm excited to be here. I look forward to sharing ideas. I look forward to engaging, and I look forward to, to being part of the very important conversation that has to take place. As Linda was talking earlier when he sort of opened the conference. We are the cheetah generation, right? As Professor George Ayitti has said. And for us to come here and talk about these issues together as Africans, is critical, because if we don't talk about it, then who is going to talk about it? We are the future, It's now that we need to start engaging on these issues and trying to understand what the solutions might be. So, as you just mentioned earlier, related to African Liberty, of which I'm here representing them as well. I'm also affiliated. I do a bit of work for News24. Then been published in a number of news platforms. So for me, platforms like this are also a way of advancing ideas of free markets, of open governments, of free trade, and all that basically defines and characterizes a free society. So I look forward to be part of this conversation, and I believe it will be very, very exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fumlani. And yeah, we are the teacher generation. We are the one to have these conversations, because if we don't hold these conversations, then there is no one else left to hold these conversations. The second speaker on my panel is Microteach, who happens to be the executive director of Eastern Africa Policy Center. So at EAPC, he serves as the ED, which is executive director, and the institute hopes to introduce, promote, and disseminate free market ideas and libertarian angles to policy making in the region. I've known Mike for some time now, and I know Mike actually has produced or done research and published papers on public policy, on trade, on international trade between the East African region and the United Kingdom. And it will also be interesting to hear from him on this particular topic. Mike, say hi to our audience today.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Mike, we can hear you.
Okay, must I use the video?
If you can use a video, well and good.
Okay, I was trying to run away from the video because I'm not in an office. I'm in a fancy hotel somewhere in town.
All right, it's okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with friends. Perhaps this might be the moment that we have to really re-examine the moment that the pandemic came, from the moment that we got to the pandemic. Perhaps this is the most critical moment that freedoms and individual rights were scuttled in the name of managing the pandemic. And probably it might be the moment that we need to be relooking at what could have gone wrong, and not only on the aspect of the resources, but also the aspects of the social freedoms that we enjoy as a society. I don't think, and I don't believe telling people to sleep at home by 7 p.m. Would stop in any way the pandemic from spreading. Okay, scientifically, maybe there could be 10 to 15%, but the reality is it was more of taking away your freedoms without necessarily giving a reasonable explanation. We've seen, and probably the stories around our country might be something that we need to re-examine. So I'm happy to see everybody on board. I'm happy to see Pumlani, Landry, Peter, Linda, and all the team, SFL as a family. I hope it's going to be a beautiful conversation, a conversation of reflection and a conversation of looking at what we need and what we ought to do in the future, because this is not the end of pandemics. We've had probably 11 pandemics since the start of the modern world, and definitely we're going to have some in future. So what is it at stake, and what are the steps that we need to do to prepare? I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. You've asked why we might have been told to go and sleep by 7 indoors. Maybe that was the time that they were using to steal the money that we are going to discuss today and create the millionaires. So my third panelist today is Landry Peter Elofishan from Ominira Initiative for Economic Advancement. Landry is the co-founder and executive director of the Ominira Initiative for Economic Advancement, a Nigerian-based think tank with a mission to research and advance solutions to Africa's socio-economic issues. So he has a background in journalism, and he has had a lot of commentary on socio-economic issues that affect Africans. So Landry, please introduce yourself to the audience today as we start our discussions this afternoon and evening.
Yeah, Konga. Na hapo ilikuwa ina kitu. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Landry, we can hear you.
Thank you for having me, Babu, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm excited to join this conversation to discuss about COVID-19 funds, how it was mismanaged and by public officials. And I think I look forward to what we'll discuss on this session because I think it will be revealing, given that we have panelists from different countries in the continent. Yes, I'm excited to join you here.
All right, thank you, Landry. And we will just dive right into what we're discussing today. So we have already established that COVID-19 was a pandemic. We were unprepared for it. And as the global south, the third world countries that Africa is, you find that a good majority of the people needed effective and efficient financial aid. And this aid came in form of donors from corporates from the West. But then it happened, it was business as usual in most countries. The people who were sleeping hungry still continued sleeping hungry. So I'll start with you, Landry. In your view, what do you consider was to be the root cause of this huge problem? That even during a pandemic, we are unable to cater for for the less fortunate, for the people who don't have a source of income that's permanent.
Okay, thank you for that. I think first off, the fact that a pandemics are emergencies, and in this case, it happened unplanned for, so to speak. But what I consider to be, I mean, speaking of Nigeria that I know of, what I consider to be the root of this problem of why the funds for this crisis was mismanaged or why it didn't get to the people that it was supposed to get to. I think it would, for me, it would be because of the lack of transparency and accountability in governance, which unfortunately is the culture of public office holders in Africa. For instance, there was the case of an agency in Nigeria called the Niger Delta Development Commission. This is an agency that is meant to cater for the development of a particular region in Nigeria. But it was reported that that commission spent about 1.5 billion naira, which is about almost $4 million, as for COVID-19 relief funds for members of the staff. And there are millions of Nigeria that couldn't even get $20 from the government. So it goes to show that first, because yes, it's our government is not prepared for emergencies like the COVID-19 that happened. And in the case where they had to come up with where private individuals donated, organizations donated, and there were financial aid, we still couldn't get it to people, the vulnerable. Instead, what we saw was a group of public office holders mismanaging the funds, redirecting what was supposed to be for the people. So I think that a lack of transparency, which is like the norm, lack of transparency and accountability in governance, which is like the norm, is one of the reasons, one of the roots of this problem, in my view.
Fumlani, why are African governments unable to prioritize? There's still looting of money, and even in a pandemic. What do you think, especially with the view of the South African, what was happening in South Africa during the pandemic?
Well, what happened was that the pandemic found Africa unprepared, right? We're unprepared as nations. We were unprepared in many ways. And most importantly, the infrastructure, right? I'm talking about the healthcare infrastructure. So there was lack of proper hospitals, lack of proper medical facilities, and so on and on that we are supposed to have as nations in Africa. And then there was also lack of the fact that our institutions were not really strong to handle the emergencies, right? Accountability along the way that lacked. I see Jacob Zuma there on the picture. That's a nice sort of, as I'm talking about lack of accountability, it's a nice image to show. So, so the institutions were not prepared. They were weak, right? So they could not really handle the emergency that was taking place. As a result, people, as money came in, that money could have came from, as you mentioned earlier, Babu, could have came in the form of donations from overseas, or perhaps from institutions around the world, or perhaps internally within countries where there was some sort of assistance by NGOs, by various groups, to those who were more at disadvantage. So there was no kind of, the institutions were not able to handle that the emergency, and people took an opportunity given the fact that the institutions were weak. They took the opportunity to sort of exploit the funds and do everything that is contrary to people's progress. So those are, I think, the two fundamental things that that happened during the pandemic. I'm talking about the healthcare infrastructure, very clear in the African continent, but also the fact that we had institutions that were very, very weak. As a result, the criminals, the crooks, they took advantage of those weak systems, and they abused them. They stole the money to advance their interests, which is very sad, and which means that there is a great deal of work we have to do as African countries.
Thank you, Phumlani. So, Mike, we had the issue of the millions spent on tea budgets by the Ministry of Health in Kenya. Do you really think that the Kenyan government prioritized the people in addressing COVID-19, the pandemic? Could these monies have been taken elsewhere to benefit people, or they were in order to buy to use the millions to buy tea and all that?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Mike, we can hear you.
Okay. Maybe one of the things that I can say is that from the Kenyan perspective, it was not, I couldn't call it business as usual, because there was a lot of mobilization of funds, both internally and externally, in the sense that we could find reallocation of funds from the ministries, from the non-essential budgets, and having them put together to the kitty, which of course we've not been told how much was used. We have not been told exactly how much was borrowed. That is number one, and that is the first thing. We do not really know on the audit queries that has been raised by the public on how far and how much itemized. I believe in a sensible environment, we could be having somebody having an itemized budget and giving us a breakdown of, we got 5 billion, an example, 5 billion Kenya shillings. We spent 1.8 on equipment. We spent 800,000 on remuneration of emergency staff, because we realized that they had some staff on short-term basis. So yes, it looks like there was a well-planned network.
Michael might have lost you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you now.
Yeah, clearly, you could see there was a network of people who have had a lot of information in regards to the procurement processes, who had a lot of prior information way long before even the pandemic was announced as the first cases and all that. So unfortunately, probably this was a planned looting of public funds, and maybe we might not get to know the truth until some years comes.
Thank you, Mike. And I will just speak from where you stopped, and I'll direct this to Fumlani. You know, there are people who might have had, the insider information, and hence this looting. Maybe we could say the people who looted were well connected in terms of if it were tenders to supply face masks and thermal guns, and some of the needful PPEs for hospitals. And you find in most African countries these PPEs and all the needful materials were supplied by people close to government. I don't know, you'll share with us the case in South Africa, but in Kenya, we know that there are those people who are paid millions and sometimes in billions, to supply masks. And the main government supplier in Kenya, which is called KEMSA, parliamentarians went there and found that their stores are full of PPEs that have not yet been released to the public. So a case of there were more PPEs that were bought than maybe could have been needed, or than were released to government facilities. So was this a plan by cronies to loot from public coffers to benefit and get paid in billions and take advantage of the pandemic from learning?
Well, you see, one of the problems that we have, just to give you context, as we talk about people who are connected or who are closer to government, getting big business deals, from government itself, or their relatives getting sort of big contracts and so on. One of the problems we have as Africans is that we fail to separate or to put in the sort of the frameworks where we say that if you work for the cabinet or government, you are not supposed to get into business deals of some sort with private companies or whatever, right? We don't have the regulations, even if they are there, they're not strong enough to ensure that the person who is in government does not sort of use their position to get business deals, or at least, or even their relatives to get to have contracts with government. So we don't have that, and as a result, that's what has also sort of hurt us over the past months. I'll give you the case in South Africa. The spokesperson of the presidency, her husband, sort of got this kind of a dodgy business deal with government, right? And it was also involving the supplies of PPEs, right? As we saw, the pandemic was sort of evolving in the country. So she was sort of suspended and moved off her post, of her work as the spokesperson of the president, because of exactly that. Her and her husband took on the opportunity to sort of abuse the system. Reason being, of course, it's that we don't have the strong regulations that are enforced so that people who are in government don't use their positions to sort of get business contracts, or their relatives get business contracts with government. So we need to fix, there's a lot of governance issues we need to fix as Africans. What this pandemic showed was that there are many core issues we need to work on as Africans. The issues of governance, the issues of infrastructure, the issues of creating a society that can be able to, to afford. I'm talking about at a personal level. People should have jobs, should be able to make income so that they can afford to sort of finance their healthcare to an extent when such diseases come through. So there were many tests here, Babu, for Africans, and many questions were raised as to what extent are Africans really prepared. Because to be frank with you, as I said earlier, it exposed the pandemic and the way it came to Africa, exposed the fact that we Africans are not prepared in many, many ways, and that we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Phumlani. Landry, Phumlani says that we are unprepared as Africans. So was it business as usual in Nigeria? Government not dealing with the pandemic as was supposed to be, and what, in your view, what's the root cause of the problem in Nigeria, Landry?
Okay, I agree with what Phumlani said. The fact that we are not prepared, we weren't prepared for this pandemic in the continent, and he obviously reveals how much we still have to do as a continent. But and talking also about cronies, I believe that I do not have doubt that because I believe that corruption is not done by public officials alone. You need some sort of relations with individuals in the business sector to, give business deals, and get kickbacks. We know that that's how corruption works. But I think that one of the things that we need to begin to look at is the method that is used to give contracts out. I think that for instance, in Nigeria, from things we have heard or from reports that we've seen, government officials, public officials give contracts out to their friends, to people who are well connected. It's a common saying that if you're not well connected, you won't even get jobs. So I think that very importantly, we need to consider looking at the method that is used to procure contracts. And as you asked, if it was business as usual in Nigeria, I think it was, even though I think that there's how we can say that Nigeria responded fairly good. But when we want to evaluate how Nigeria came through for the vulnerable citizens during the pandemic, I think that it's business as usual, especially because, for instance, it was in the news some months ago, one of the ICPC, that's independent, one of the, what do you call it now, agencies that see to corrupt officials, corruption, had this report that funds meant for the public were found in some individuals' accounts. And I remember then about a month or two ago, it was in the news. So I still believe that even though we weren't prepared, some things were done right to prevent the pandemic from, spreading. But it's still business as usual, because for all the palliatives that the federal government tried to put out, number one, it wasn't enough. And in some cases, it didn't even get to the people. And we found out that most of these monies, as I said earlier, when for the instance of Niger Delta Development Commission, that paid so much to its staff and not to the people of the region that is meant to cater for. So yes, I think it's still business as usual when we talk about okay. So I think it's still business as usual when we talk about how the government respond, and especially how the funds was used to reaching out to the vulnerable citizens.
Right. Thank you so much, Landry, for that. So, Mike, in your work at EAPC, you do a lot of policy research, and so I want us to understand. Yes, we there was a pandemic that came and got countries unprepared. And arguably, for most African countries, they are yet to experience the second wave of the pandemic. So we are still having the pandemic. Governments still have to manage the pandemic. From where we started to still where we are, in your thoughts, what would be the best way for government to help the common citizens to receive the COVID-19 assistance funds? Because they are still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. So how best do you think government should have handled this, and going forward, how best should government continue handling the pandemic, because we're still living with the pandemic? Mike.
Okay. One of the things that in our constitution, Article 43, it clearly states that one of the basic rights of a citizen is right to access the highest possible form of healthcare. And this is a basic duty to the government. So I don't see any reason why the government should behave in total disregard of its duty. And if the citizens feel that the government is not in any way performing its duty, I think there is a way that we can work it around and replace the government, because we can replace the government, but we cannot replace our country. So the bottom line is government performing its functions as enshrined in the constitution. It is not a favor that the citizens are asking for. It's not really something that the citizens are begging. It's the backstops of the government, because that is its basic role, providing affordable, highest possible standards of healthcare to its citizens. So going forward, I think one of the performance, probably what we could say key performance indicators of the government, is actually how it provides a health service to its citizens. If it does not meet such a basic role as healthcare, then we don't have business having that kind of government in place. So it's up to the citizens to look at the government as an employee that you have given a role, a responsibility to provide for you a service. If it's not providing for that service, then you've got no business with it. You fire and hire somebody who is competent to deliver the job.
All right, thank you, Mike. So to our audience, if you could be having any question, you can kindly do it on the chat box, and we'll be highlighting some of the questions or comments that you could be having on our discussion this afternoon. So, Landry, let me come back to you. And how do you think government would have best handled this, and how should government continue handling this, because we are still in the pandemic? In your opinion, Landry?
Okay, well, I don't think there's a one-cap-fits-all way to do this, because we've seen different ways that the government has been responding. There has been a reduction in interest for some sectors. There has been stimulus packages for MSMEs, and the government has been responding. The Nigerian government has been responding by taking up different policies. However, what I think should have been done differently is, instead of trying to help the citizens from the center, I think it would have been able to reach the citizens more if the palliatives or whatever the government wanted to give to the people was done at the local government level. I think that would have helped a whole lot of Nigerians more than the government trying to help from the center, trying to do everything from the center. I think that is one thing that would have been done differently. The government would have been able to help a lot of citizens if it had let the local government do some things other than trying to do it from the center.
Thank you, Landry. Fumlani, let me ask you this. Working in the civil society space and also the nonprofit organizations space, what would have or should be the role of non-profit organizations in relation to government management of crisis funds? We saw some coming in terms of donations, but in your thoughts, how or what's that role that non-profit organizations could have played or should continue playing in the management of the crisis funds, considering the COVID-19 experience?
Well, I think the NGOs have a very critical role, and one of the few critical roles is the effort to hold politicians accountable. We have to hold politicians accountable. So NGOs should point out if something is being done wrong, right? They must be able to mobilize people, right? Mobilize ideas or the climate of opinion against the wrongdoing in government, right? I think that is very important because if NGOs aren't playing the critical role, then one mechanism to hold government accountable will be weaker, right? And the more mechanisms are stronger, various mechanisms, and in a democratic society. There is also a role they can play in terms of just making sure that whatever funds come through to them, because some funds come through through NGOs, and then NGOs can assist those who are in need. They need to show example, that to show the best way to use the funds, in contrast to how government has been mismanaging government funds across the African continent. So for me, I think those roles are quite critical, and we've seen how the significant role that was played by NGOs over the past months, and it needs to be appreciated. For me, I see NGOs, which are basically private institutions, making a huge difference in Africa, and we need more of them advancing the ideas that will promote democracy, that will promote individual freedom in the continent, and that will basically hold government accountable. Their role is very much, it's something that cannot be ignored, and it needs to be encouraged in our society.
All right, thank you, Phumlani. Mike, let me come back to you and ask, there were funds that were being sent to the citizens. Was that the best way for government to reach out to help citizens by sending them funds? Or do you think that there was another better way that government could have done this?
Either way, sending funds to the citizens or creating a better environment so that they can earn a living on their own could have been the best way to mitigate the COVID-19 impact on livelihoods of majority of the people. However, given the situation that we were in, there was no informal jobs. Government was encouraging everybody to stay home. So even the menial jobs that most of the citizens that the funds were meant to help or to cushion were, these are people from informal settlements, people who earn a daily wage, people who walk to their place of work, work for a day, get their payment, close of business, go back home with something for the family and all that. I think in the short run, that was the best approach to look at it. In the long run, probably no. Empowerment of people to make and create their own wealth is always the best thing to do. And another big question in the room is, do we really have audited financial trails of the funds that were supposedly sent to vulnerable Kenyans. I doubt if we are able to really audit and get questions answered in regards to how many Kenyans were given these funds. Were these funds really reaching out to these Kenyans? You know, one of the biggest challenges that we have as far as COVID-19 is concerned is the mystery around the finances in it, the mystery around the procurement processes, the mystery around the numbers. Nobody would wish to wake up one morning and go in front of the cameras and say to Kenyans, hey, we received a total of $3 billion, and so far we've spent 2.5. And you give Kenyans breakdown on how you spent the money. Nobody is willing to do that level of accountability. And you know, as long as we are having a mystery around a process, it is a recipe for one, corruption. It's a recipe for two, breeding more cartels in the system. We know when we started, we could see government giving us a breakdown of, oh, we've received $3 million from USAID. We have received another $5 million from the French government. We have received this much from Africa Development Bank. We have received, you know, until a point where the government could no longer give us updates on exactly how much were the funds that the government received as far as COVID-19 is concerned. We do not even know how many Kenyans received those monies and the frequency at which they received the money. And, you know, as long as we do not have the numbers on the table, you know, we are going to have the fancy stories of government saying we have sent. I saw a clip on, I think either BBC or Al Jazeera, where a government official was saying they have spent more than 60 billion, as in sending to vulnerable Kenyans. 60 billion, you mean? 60 billion is not a pocket change. You know, it could have changed lots of lives of people. In the short run, back to your question, in the short run, that was a solution because most of the the families didn't have an income because they could not go to work because of the ban on gatherings. Most of the families could not even fend for their families because most of the businesses had been shut down. Most of the people could not actually get an income on the table. So that was a good for the short run. In the long run, I think it was not the best solution. And of course, what makes it worse is the accountability bit of it. You know, we've not, if we could say, if there is an animal that I've seen that is so unaccountable on this earth, it is our government. You know, they won't want anybody who asks those tough questions. You know, and anyway, we're here. That is the reason why we should be having this conversation so that we can really try and give our 2 cents.
Right, yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, when we started, we actually said that we are the ones who are here, we are the third generation, and that's why we are going to have these discussions and ask these questions about these funds, about you know, where the monies are going. So, Landry, we've gone like through the first phase of the pandemic, and you know, for Africa, we might be going to a second phase for most countries. And have we learned a lesson? And would governments, for example, in the Nigerian perspective, be able to manage another pandemic if it came? Have we learned our lesson? And as you answer that, Landry, Rotich said something about you know, replacing government. You know, knowing about what has been going on in Nigeria for the last few days about SARS, would you even would we think about replacing government, Nigeria, for example, because you know, failing in their role to offer affordable and quality healthcare to its people?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I mean, if something is not working, we should change it. So I totally agree that we may need to replace our government here in Nigeria. If the government is failing in its duties, we should replace the government. But to answer the question that you asked, that if have we learned our lesson, should in case a second pandemic, the second wave of the pandemic rises now? Well, I want to believe that we should have learned our lessons because the pandemic has hit the country and the continent in a way that we've not seen in decades. Almost every aspect of the economy of the society was impacted by this pandemic. So I believe that moving forward, the Nigerian government and other governments across the continent would have learned certain lessons, especially in the case of being prepared for pandemics. Having infrastructure set in the health sector and other sectors. So I want to believe that we have learned our lesson because we wouldn't want to experience what we did, this year with the pandemic and the lockdowns across the world. But yes, we need to replace our government. If, as I said, if you're failing at your duties, we need to change that. So I agree with Mike that we may need to change our government.
All right. Thank you, Landry. From Lani, let me come to you with the same question. Do you think that governments have learned their lesson? Would they handle such crises in future pandemics?
No, I don't think they've learned their lesson. Politicians don't learn. That's my experience with them. When I look at them, having observed them for a number of years now, politicians don't learn. They continue to do the same thing, thinking that it's going to sort of bring positive result. And we see a lot of failing policies from our governments, not only here in South Africa, around the African continent as well. And politicians continue, with those failing policies. In South Africa, is being led by labor unions, right? That was at one point nonsense because people couldn't believe some of the things that were done as a response to the pandemic were just disaster.
From Lani, I think we lost you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm saying my view is that still even today, my view is that in Africa, there was a huge overreaction by governments in terms of policy as a response to the pandemic, right? I think much greater damage was done by politicians and governments. And then the people forgot, especially those in governments, or I will say the elite, that pandemics, and I've said this a number of times in South Africa's media, that the pandemics don't behave the same around the world, right? What happens in Europe and North America really doesn't mean it's going to happen in Africa, right? Because of some institutions have pointed to a different climate, the fact that it's warm. People have pointed to an average age where we are the youngest continent in the world, an average age of plus minus 20, and COVID-19 tends to have a higher death rate to older people, right? So there were many factors there that we should have considered before we entered, as we sort of were dealing with the pandemic. In South Africa, our politicians, everything was just politicized. The pandemic itself was politicized. And in many cases, scientists were not listened to, but government employees and unions were much more listened than scientists, right? So there was politics around the pandemic to an extent that, in my view, many of the lockdowns we have in South Africa were not justified, right? They were not justified. They had a huge impact, in people's lives. 2.2 million people in the second quarter in South Africa, they lost their jobs, right? We don't know when are they going to have those jobs back, right? It's going to take time for businesses to get back on their feet. So I mean, the destruction of livelihoods has been much more greater than the impact of COVID-19 in Africa. And when you look at even the fertility rate, the numbers and so on, Africa is way, in fact, even the World Health Organization basically says Africa escaped the worst, right, with respect to this pandemic. And it's not really a surprise because pandemics don't generally behave the same around the world. So there was a lot of mistakes were made, politics, politics around pandemic, politicians abusing their power. We saw that a lot in South Africa. So I mean, I doubt will learn because they love power, and for them to be in power and control people, and many of the people working in government to loot the money, corruption, and the fact that we have the weak institutions that I spoke about earlier. I'm quite learned in the sense that they must hold their governments accountable when it comes to elections. But whether politicians have learned, I doubt, man. I really.
All right. Thank you so much, Lani. And as we wind up after that 1 hour of an engaging discussion, I want just to hear the closing comments from our panelists today. I'll start with Landry. In 30 seconds, as you close, share with us what's the way forward as far as looting, the stealing of public funds is concerned. What's the way forward for Africa?
Well, I think we need government that we need a government that we can trust in all countries across the continent. Until we have such, we would continue to have funds misused and misappropriated. And to do that, we all need to rise and ensure that we seek transparency and accountability of our government.
Thank you, Landry. Mike, what's the way forward?
That we've gotten at this point in time is that it's true that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, and perhaps that is what is called on everyone, each and every one of us, to be vigilant, so that we can be able to protect our rights, our freedoms, and all that, even at the times of pandemics like this, and not to allow governments disguised in pandemics to grab our freedoms and our rights.
Thank you, Mike. Lani, 30 seconds. What's the way forward as far as our discussion this afternoon is concerned?
The way forward is for people to be knowledgeable and to understand their rights and to hold their governments accountable. I think that's very important. If we are knowledgeable, we won't be abused by politicians. We will hold them accountable. Even those who are corrupt, we will hold them accountable. We have to ask for institutions. We need to question, are our institutions working hard? Are they credible? Are they functioning properly, so that they are able or they are capable of holding those who are corrupt accountable? I think that's very important for Africa.
All right, thank you so much, our panelists. Thank you, Lani. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Landry, for that riveting discussion that we've had. One of our leaders, Richard David, says that if we can't fight corruption, then we've learned nothing from the pandemic. So, and he shares that, you know, in Uganda and as in many other African countries, when there was a ban on flight, the government officials who used to fly out for treatment and not invest in our health structures, in our health systems, suffered so much when the airports were closed. You know, if they learned a lesson, well and good. If they didn't learn a lesson, then we still have to remain vigilant. As Mike says, the price of liberty is remaining eternally vigilant to our freedoms, to our individual rights, and ensuring that government does not curtail our rights. So thank you so much for being tuned in. We're going to take a break right now, and then the next session will be starting in a few minutes. Thank you for keeping it here.
Well, hi everyone. I hope we are still there. My name is Joyce. I'm the president for Ladies of Liberty Alliance Kenya. I am also the regional coordinator from Tanzania. I'd love to take this opportunity to welcome you for the next session, which is our second session for the LibertyCon Africa, whereby we will be discussing the topic, why aren't young people getting jobs, university certificates versus technical skills. This is not a new topic. This is not a new discussion. We've probably had these discussions in many other discourses. So it will be interesting to see how we are going to unravel the discussion about youth unemployment in Africa. I am joined by my panelists. One, I have Amable Manarikriza, who is the CEO for Center for Development and Enterprise, that is Goettler. I also have Fola Aina, who is an international security and development expert. And then I have Kasmil Gago, who is an information and communications technology expert. I'd like to give them maybe a minute each to say hi to our audiences. I'll start with Kasmil Gago. Just say hi to our audience.
Hi. Hi from Burundi.
Oh yeah, that's Aimable. Say hi.
Hi Joyce. Hi everyone. Hi from Burundi.
Okay, thank you so much, Aimable. It's great to have you this evening. Kasmil Gago, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Fola, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Hello, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier, the topic about unemployment, it's not a new topic. It's a topic that many have tried to discuss, many NGOs, many governments, they have tried to come up with strategies on how to address this. If you're making progress, that's debatable. And to start off the conversation, I'd love to just go into my questions. So number one, and I will start with Gago. Who is to blame for the stubborn rise of unemployment, for the rise of unemployment cases in Africa? Who is to blame? Is it our education systems? Is it the government policies? Is it the private sector? Or is it us as youth? Gago, please go ahead.
Sorry, I think the host had muted me by mistake, I think. All right, so I'll go ahead and say there's no one to blame but ourselves. We just need to organize ourselves. One thing that I've learned from my interaction with different levels of society in the continent is that there's a group that seems to want to get it easily, and there's a group that is really trying out to get things done correctly, but we have created a very toxic environment in our continent that it's eating us away. Something else, our education system tends to focus on people reading and recalling instead of innovating. And those who try to innovate, again, the environment really creates a barrier to entry. That's it from me.
And Fola, who do you think is to blame?
Thank you very much once again, everyone. It's great to be here. To be honest, I think when it comes to job creation, both sides of the divide would have to take an equal share of the blame, and in a sense also the lack of availability of jobs. And what I simply mean by this is, so for instance, I may be a young person who has the skills, who has everything required to take on a job, but then the government, for instance, doesn't make the jobs available for me to take on. That's one. And then on the other hand, it may be that the government has made these jobs available, but on my own part, I have failed to acquire the right skills, required to be able to take on the job. And so a lot of times when you see national statistical agencies, churning out data on, say, the level of unemployment in society, there's another addition they always include, which is on alongside unemployment. So underemployment may simply be a situation whereby a person has a job, but that job is not necessarily the kind of job that's commensurate with their level of qualification, but they only have to take on this job because that's what's available at the time. Okay, and whereas unemployment, on the other hand, may simply be a clear case of, irrespective of whether they are qualified or they are not qualified, these jobs do not exist. So on the one hand, just to summarize, the government has a role to play, yes. Private sector has a role to play, yes, but also young people have a role to play, because if the jobs are not available, no one is going to hire an unskilled person to come work for them in the organization, because if they do, then they have to spend additional resources retraining and retraining them to be fit for the job. That's why a lot of times these organizations just prefer to see people who already have the prerequisite skills required for the role. So government has a role, yes, to provide these jobs. Private sector has a role, yes, to also provide these jobs. And then, of course, the youth also have a role to play to ensure that they are well equipped with the right skill sets to be able to take on these jobs. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Amable, who do you think is to blame? Amable, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Hello, Joyce.
Hello. So I was asking, in your opinion, briefly, who do you think is?
Yes, thank you. I think in my side, I think the problem which make young people not access to job is government. Government is one the problem we have which make difficult to access to job. Why I talk about the government? Let me tell you the just 3 points who we have government, and the intervention from government make us employer until now. So if you see education system in Africa or in different parts of the world, we have government who went intervention from government with education system, with the plan from government, say. So we must start this program, but the program we learn in education, our education is a program which entrepreneurs, people who create a job, doesn't need enough. That's the first problem we have because the government. Second is because most of the entrepreneur who we know, the people who must create the jobs, government, okay? And the entrepreneur who try to, who have a plan to create job for people have a lot of barriers to create this kind of job in different countries. So most of the barriers are legislation from government. Government make so hard to create job for people who must create this job, and also make difficult for people who must stop the job for people who have get job from them. That is means government also make many barriers for people who are we have to create this kind of job young people need now. The last point, the why I say is government. The problem we have to this issue is government. The last point is that the uncertainty. You know, most of the country in Africa we have public policies created by government, and most of the public policies created by government come not to create stability in most of the country we have. But so most of the time when government creates public policies and take time to resolve the public policies for many people, these create uncertainty. This creates a problem for people who have money and people who have this capacity to create the job. That has means entrepreneur. So when people have the capacity to create this job and we make a bad public policy or bad climate in the country, that is make people who have the dream to create a job in X country take time to create this kind of job. That is, I think, in short, I can say young people does get job because government. Short.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I would love to jump into the issue of education in Africa. Well, there has been a lot to talk about education in Africa. And the question I'd love to ask, and this one goes to Gago, is our education systems in Africa focusing so much on or lagging behind in innovating education to meet the needs of the market right now? Is the education in Africa ignoring the reality?
I don't think so. So there's a dual answer to that question.
Okay.
And look at it from different perspectives. We've seen people who've gone through the same African education system, and they've moved to economies that are a bit competitive, that are a bit rewarding on merit, that are a bit open to innovation, and they have really succeeded. I'll give you an example of Elon Musk. Elon Musk moved from South Africa, went to Canada, then went to the US. We know that the wealth trajectory of Elon Musk is way ahead of the curve, and he's way ahead of his time. So it's arguably that he's on a path of either being the top 5 or being the top 10. I mean, the top people who are going to turn around a lot of innovative products that are going to create wealth in the world. When you look at it that way, then you realize that it's not entirely that we don't create value in education system. It's a mix. It's a mixed bag. So today, when you go to Malaysia and Singapore, some of the best fintechs companies in Malaysia and Singapore are being run by Kenyans. Some of the best people who do farming are Zimbabweans, irrespective of where you go. Some of the best bankers in the UK are Nigerians, irrespective of where you go. So that tells you that it's not entirely that our education system is not.
Okay, thank you so much. And to you, Fallo. So Gago says we don't have to entirely blame on our education. There could be some hope, or maybe there's a problem somewhere. And while at it, what are the innovative strategies and capacity development efforts that should be adopted in order to create diverse job opportunities for our youth in Africa?
Thank you very much for the question. So again, it's important to note that not everyone would have an opportunity to finish from college or from university and end up working for the government, right? The government has to be able to create the enabling environment, okay, for entrepreneurs, okay, to emerge from within society, to be able to take on jobs or businesses, that are self-sufficient, okay, and self-sustaining. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing the government can do is to prioritize public-private partnerships. Okay, so for instance, let's say there's a state and the government is trying to. Okay, let me even give a very practical example. So there's a state in Nigeria where the government wanted to create jobs for the people, and it had to partner with a private organization to build a very big hatchery, a very big poultry farm. So what the private sector did was they brought in all the resources and everything, and the government gave them the land for free. Okay, but right now the business has been established, and the maize, okay, that the birds require, for the farm is so much that they are taking up all the maize in that state alone. So you can imagine everybody who has a maize farm, for instance, already knows that there are off-takers who are going to take off their maize. So it's important that the government works hand in hand with the private sector, because the government may not be able to create all the jobs. Even if we want to say that everybody who finishes from the university is going into the government, this may not be sustainable. The problem with this also is because of the current situation with the world, a lot of economies are slipping into recessions, and then with the global pandemic. Okay, so government needs to be able to start thinking out of the box for innovative ways. And these innovative ways, to a large extent, have to do with creating opportunities with the private sector, because government can't take on the responsibility alone of catering to the needs of the teeming youth population who are out there joining the labor force every single year. So the way forward for me would be to partner with the private sector. And there are many ways, they can go about doing this. They can use technology, innovations. They can use training, skills acquisition trainings, like I said, and also, vocational trainings also to help people to acquire the skills that will enable them to be self-sufficient. So irrespective of what they study in school, they can always go up and start up a business and become self-reliant for themselves.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Fallow. And as we continue, I'd love to ask the audience, if you have any question, please feel free to leave that on the chat box. At the end, before the end of the session, we'll have a brief Q&A session. And okay,
Joyce,
I'd love to.
I have something to add.
Okay, please go ahead.
There are two answers to that question. There's an aspect of people going to school, and there's another aspect of people being allowed to practice what they've gone to school.
Okay.
How many African countries allow their engineers or people who've done STEM subjects to actually practice the skills that they've learned in school? Very few. That is also something else that we need to digest.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And I'm being corrected. My panelist is called Fallow, not Fola. Apologies for that. And Aimable, I'd love to ask this. Anytime I've been in a discussion like this, where we are discussing about unemployment and the issue of youth in Africa, there has always been that aspect of, African youth are lazy. So I'd love to ask you, are we lazy? Is it the reason is why we are not getting jobs? Are we not putting ourselves out there? Are we not developing ourselves personally? Are we not marketing ourselves properly? Are we lazy? I'm able.
Thank you for the question. I think people have a talent. People will have innovation. I think if you get the best place with the best public institutional, we can make the difference. What people we miss is the best place, is the best climate. And this situation, this climate is created by people, not government, not public institution. We are not lazy. We miss only the best environment.
Okay, Gago, are we lazy?
The bad environment we have made it by small people who try to make us difficult our life. Only.
Okay, briefly, Gago, do you think we are lazy, youth?
I don't think so. So we might have pockets of entitlement mentality, which this is all over the world, okay? But generally speaking, you cannot say African people or African youth are lazy. We are not. Because if people move to other environments, they tend to succeed. So that is a factor that we need to also put in when you're mentioning that people are lazy or not. So we are not.
Okay, Aina, and you, do you feel you are lazy?
Absolutely not. I believe the African youths are one of the most hardworking, one of the most resilient, and one of the most courageous set of young people in the world, considering the already seemingly difficult circumstances, okay, in which they find themselves having to thrive, okay? And that is why you see that when young Africans go abroad, whether it's in school or whether doing business, they thrive so much, they excel so much because the environment is more enabling, okay? So I want to believe that if the environment, the right kind of environment can be given for young Africans, okay, they would do exceptionally well. And currently, they are doing absolutely well, given the limiting circumstances they're having to confront with.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay, now let's talk about social media. It won't be logic talking about unemployment and evading the issue of social media. We live in the age of social media. So the question I'd love to ask, how should the youth use social media to put themselves out there, to show their skills? And is it time we focus more on the online space when looking for employment? Do we go online and just do online stuff? I'll start with you, Gago.
Well, the online, as you correctly put it, online networking is extremely important because it's limitless, it's less costly, but the reality is that we need to get out there and meet people, get involved with different courses, get involved with different activities. That's how you're going to learn what is happening where. Social media, I'll tell you, there's LinkedIn. You can do a free version of it. There's a paid version of it, which is extremely professional. I would encourage people to do more of either reading and writing of subject matters they're interested in, because when you put your knowledge out there, people get to notice that, oh, so you know more than people would think. Because sometimes our CVs or resumes are a bit limiting in the way we express ourselves. So there's a lot that we leave behind while we're trying to put what would presumably be our marketing banner out there as a CV, and the recommended is very small. So you wouldn't pack everything that you've done in 3 pages. But as you keep putting out the knowledge that you've learned over the years, as you keep commenting on what others are saying and what others are sharing, then people get to notice you. You also get to learn more of what is really happening in your domain or what is happening in the domains of interest.
Okay, thank you so much. Aina, anything to say about that briefly?
Thank you very much. Let me say that young people need to consider a couple of things when it comes to social media. The first is that social media is a double-edged sword in the sense that it offers a lot of opportunities. And at the same time, if you're not careful on how you use social media, it can literally ruin your career even before you start it. Okay. And again, since we're talking about skills, and for young people having the right kind of skills to make them employable and all of that, I want to say that irrespective of your degree, irrespective of what you acquire, okay, irrespective of what you studied in school, whether you have a PhD or not, a lot of times your qualifications would only get you to the door, okay? But what gives you access beyond the door is your character, your competence, and your capacity. And now let me go back to social media. You see, sometimes when you look at the profiles of young people, some young people put up different things on social media, okay? Imagine someone who is looking for a job, and then the display picture of that person on social media is of a shirt that is torn. Who wants to give a job to someone that is wearing a shirt that is torn? The first appearance is already a turn-off. Okay, I like us to be very practical. The first appearance is already a turn-off, right? And then you just want to scroll through the person's content okay, maybe in the last few hours or in the last few days, and then all you see are abusive words, toxic words, and you're wondering, is this the kind of person I want to employ? Okay, so you have to be careful about how you approach people on social media, and most importantly, even the image you create of people, okay, of yourself on social media. All right. Currently, I'm working on the job, and it's a remote job. Okay, and I was able to get the job through Twitter. So I saw the advertisement on Twitter, I applied for it, and I got the job. Now, young people need to remember that because of COVID, okay, because of COVID-19, let me say this emphatically, the prerogative and the importance of using social media as a tool for gaining jobs cannot be overemphasized, because a lot of jobs, a lot of organizations which have physical structures are now asking their workers and their staff to work from home. And also the new jobs are going to be jobs that are required to do remotely. So if you can't come to work physically in an office, it simply means that you have to be able to prove yourself and demonstrate your ability to work remotely. And that, first of all, starts from your online image, the image we have of you online. Okay, so how competent are you online? Have you been able to demonstrate certain requirements that enable you to be able to do a job remotely? Can you work under little supervision or no supervision at all? Okay, and like I said, most importantly, how is your character on social media? All right, it's very, very important that you ensure that this is put in place, because that's the first point of call when people want to offer you a job. And then lastly, also, these days, when you are applying for a job, I know a lot of young people are listening to me, so I want to put this out there. When you are applying for a job, you see somewhere in the online form, they always ask you for your social media handle. They ask you for your social media handle. Some people just feel, oh, why they're asking for my social media handle? I don't need to tell them my social media handle. Even if you don't include your social media handle, they can always go and check your name. And with your name, they can easily find out your social media handle, okay? And see the kind of online footprints you have been keeping online. If those footprints are not commensurate with what you're saying on your CV, I'm a gentle person, I like playing sports, I like reading book, they'll just say, no, this person is not the kind of person we're looking for, because what they are saying on their CV is completely different from the image we have of them out there on social media. So your social media footprints is very, very important. It's very, very important. And half the time, as they say, the internet never forgets, okay? So you don't want to put out things that would come back to haunt you later. You want to be very careful with the kind of footprints you put out as a young person, especially in this era of COVID where jobs are difficult to come by. Okay, and most jobs are only gotten online and remotely. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Aina, for that. I couldn't agree more. I think to the guest, I think it's time now we go back and try to filter out our social media platforms. And to you, Aimable, you have vast experience with nonprofit, with NGOs, and you are the CEO of an NGO, a think tank that is really doing well in Burundi. I'd love to ask, what is the role of nonprofit, of NGOs, of international government organizations, of the civil society in this conversation of youth unemployment?
Okay, thank you. I think there's a two-way civil. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I say there's two way civil society can try to push different in Africa. The first way, there is a civil society who try to make their effort in education, in like Africans to for Liberty. They work in educate the next generation of leaders. So we need we need to work so hard to educate more people and help them to understand the best way they can access a job in SFL. There are many opportunity, many skills we can access for free, and these skills can also help them to access to the job. So that is the first point for education civil society organization. But also there is also try to empower them to become the best person who can define the role of youth in this continent. But there is another role, the big role for civil society like organization, a think tank, is to try to influence a reform in different law who make very difficult people who have the power to create a job to didn't do it. So what I'd like to say, there is a sector provides in education who have skills, who have capacity in terms of money, in terms of skills, and many others think can, and this kind of private sector uh, have a lot of things, but they make different barriers to access to the land, to create university. Private university is very difficult to create a private university in Africa. For example, there is many documents, many time, many money what government asks because there are corruption created by bureaucracy and so on. So what the solution exactly is like is to promote economic freedom. Economic freedom is the best solution, because why talk about economic freedom is because for example, we are more before the independence in many countries until now, we have many plans. We have many plans from government, but most of the plan from government, no, all plan from government doesn't give people to access to job. So the solution we have now is economic freedom, and economic freedom give people the opportunity to create many opportunity for many people, because people have if people have the best situation, like a small government who don't ask him taxes and many barriers to main thing to work as government, I think is the big problem. The tax in Africa is still the big issue, and economic freedom is the solution to give civil society group to show to the government why the big government, the size of government is the problem who make people to not access to job, because people who have money and entrepreneurs who have a dream to create job for young people try to do it, but there is another group of people who have a
Okay.
violence to make many taxes to these kind of people who have the opportunity, the capacity to create jobs. So there's also another problem in rule of law. Most of the country in Africa makes so difficult our justice, our system, the rule of law in most of country in Africa is very difficult. So if we continue to still in kind of environment when economic freedom is not profitable for individually, is very also difficult. The same thing for money. Most of the money in Africa is still very how can I say in English, there are still there is we can say inflation or instability in monetary money. So when there is instability created by government, remember this is created by government, the people who have money and people I like to understand, entrepreneurs who have money and they have capacity to create job, and when he come in country and see that there is uh, a, a problem in monetary system, he take time to come in this country to create jobs. So there is many things that I can share, but in short, economic freedom is the best solution what civil society can use to help people to access to job, but because
Okay.
many years before government didn't do that with many
Okay.
plans.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Imable. And just briefly, while we are at it, this is to Gago and Aina, just briefly. What is the role of volunteerism? How do we use volunteerism to professionally grow ourselves, to get the skills? Just briefly, what's your opinion on volunteerism, and do you think the youth in Africa are underplaying or undermining the impact that volunteering can have in their professional growth? I mean it, Gago.
Oh, I go first.
Yeah.
So volunteerism is very important, but there's also an aspect of income constraints in most African households. So if people can create a balance, this is self-driven. If you can create a balance of volunteering for a few hours and also at the same time you're trying to figure out what to do with yourself, you will create an atmosphere that allows you to meet people, that allows you to learn what you would not have been taught in class. It also gives you an early stepping stone, rather, for lack of a better word, to get to understand how does the world really runs outside a classroom, or outside a campus, or outside a household. Yes. So it's a free exposure to the real world situation. So it is very important that people get to understand the value of it and properly utilize this value correctly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Aina, what's your opinion on volunteering?
Actually, I think volunteering is very, very important for young people with regards to their career trajectory, career advancement. And let me quickly say a few things with regards to volunteerism. Don't wait till you finish your degree before you start volunteering. Because sometimes you may have finished with a first-class degree, you have done a very, very good job. You've taken all your time to work hard at school, and then you're out there expecting to just have a job and, but then you see the adverts and the adverts say minimum 3 years, minimum 5 years. You're wondering, oh, nobody's told me this before when I was studying. But the trick is that during your studies, maybe your undergraduate years, each semester, sometimes the semesters in Africa are so long, the semester breaks are so long. Some of them go as much as 2 months, 3 months. What you can do during that time is to make yourself available to the organization you intend to work for at the end of your graduation. Whether it's in, you make yourself available and you tell them that, see, you are still in school, but you want to learn, okay? And I know there's the problem with finances, because most of the time these organizations don't pay volunteers, okay? What you can do is you can negotiate with them and tell them, I will come 3 times in a week, okay? Now, if you come 3 times in a week, right, you are acquiring skills, okay? You are acquiring network, okay? And then you are being in the front line of being considered should an opening in that organization present itself. Now, if you imagine doing this for a 4-year course every holiday, or like a 5-year course, maybe you're studying engineering, 5 years, okay? Now there are 10 semesters in 5 years. And each of this semester holiday, okay, you go and you volunteer in an organization for maybe 2 months. By the time you add up all of this together under volunteering, you'll be surprised that by the time you are graduating, you have amassed as much as 18 months to 24 months worth of work experience already, just from graduating, by graduating. And that already pitches you on an edge, on an advantage to getting a job in the desired organization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. As we wind up now, and again, I'd suggest that for the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to leave them on the chat box. We will make sure to go through them, some of them. So as we wind up, what are the sustainable solutions for addressing youth unemployment? Well, governments have tried some things, some programs. NGOs, IGOs have tried to put up some measures to curb this. But again, as I said, to measure in terms of progress, that's still debatable. So in your opinion, individually, what are the sustainable solutions to address the issue of unemployment in Africa? Gago, maybe you should go first.
All right, thank you again. I would say that there's no one who has ever created wealth by receiving wealth from others unless you're inheriting wealth from your family lineage. And again, most of the people who have really created real wealth that is sustainable, they have done it either over a generation or they have done it by themselves. So back to our countries, what is really happening? In most African countries, wealth creation, there's no space, or rather allowable mechanism to create sustainable wealth in some countries. In some countries there is, but there is a unified observation in the continent that wealth or space to create wealth is an exclusive club still yet, okay? If you want to allow people to be to create wealth, you have to allow them to be productive. And I would coin a word that maybe might not be so common or not so used, what I would call cooperative economics. And in reference to our republic, Kenya. Kenya is a country of circles or cooperative movements, if for those who don't understand circles. And when you look back in the history of cooperative economics, the days when agriculture was, giving a lot of money in the country and so many other African countries, people pulled together to create wealth. People pulled together to create what I would call securities. People pulled together to create capital. And so for us to create sustainable ways of creating wealth and maintaining this wealth is, one, we need to pull together. Two, we need to minimize the love of foreign goods over ours. We tend to spend more buying foreign goods. That what it does to our economy is it moves money away from our countries, okay? We also need to create an environment that creates confidence to people who have created wealth in the continent so that they don't move it away. It's a common occurrence in the continent that people, even those who do tenders, for example, for lack of another example, people would make money out of government tenders in a typical scenario and move this money to offshore accounts. Why is this so? It's because they are not confident enough with where they are making this money and they're moving it somewhere else they would prefer or feel safe to keep this money. What does this do in terms of economies? When there is excessive capital flight, the cost of credit goes up because there's scarce money, and this money, the risk is too high, or this money is it's highly competitive. So if you have a ratio of 10 people competing over $1,000, it means either you'll be given very small portions of this money, or whoever is willing to take the money at a very high cost will end up getting the money. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Aina?
Thank you very much. Let me quickly just say that going forward, one of the things required to ensure the right kind of environment is provided for these jobs for young people is that, on the one hand, just to reiterate what I said before, it's the prerogative of the government to create this environment. And one of the ways in which they can do this is to ensure that the right things are put in place. For instance, security. Nobody's going to come and invest in a country where there's insecurity, okay? Also, the quality of graduates that are coming out, which goes back to the level of access to quality education in the country. Okay, what is the level of access to quality education in the country? How invested is the government in its public or educational institutions? Okay, and then of course also government cannot do it all because government has so many other priorities to cater to. All right, so it's in the government's interest to also partner with the private sectors. Very, very important that the government partners with the private sectors. Now, remember that this part is the responsibility of the government. Of course, like there are so many other things you can add to this. The import substitution policies, for instance, where the government creates, the things that people are normally inclined to buy abroad, the government begins to build the factories, domestically, so that people can patronize those products. All of this, again, cannot still happen if the right environment has not been created. But having said that, I also want to quickly add something that's in the hands of the youth themselves, okay, who are desirous of these jobs, okay? A lot of times people go to school and they acquire knowledge in theory. But when it comes to practice, they aren't necessarily able to put this into practice. So I want to tell young people, as much as you acquire knowledge, seek practical skills. And that's the importance of vocational and technical education, okay? And then beyond all of this, there's a new debate, okay? When it comes to, maybe you've been hearing about the future of work, and all of that, or even as the World Economic Forum put it, most of the time they call these things soft skills, or the most desired skills that organizations begin to look out for going forward from this year 2020. And let me quickly list out a few of them. So as a young person, as I list out these points, just begin to ask yourself, which of these do I know, which of these do I have, and which of these do I need to go and fine-tune or acquire? Number one is complex problem solving. Complex problem solving. Can you solve complex problems beyond what you studied in the classroom? How critical are you when it comes to thinking? Do you have critical and analytical thinking capabilities? How creative and innovative are you also? Do you have people management skills? Are you able to get along with people, able to work with teams? How well do you coordinate with others? What is your level of emotional intelligence? It requires also emotional intelligence to be able to work in a group where people are, okay? What is your judgment and decision making? How reliable are you to make the best decisions in the overall interest of the organization you're working in, okay? What is your level of service orientation? What are your negotiation skills? Okay, you see that these are things that you may not necessarily learn in the four corners of the classroom, but I think you need to teach yourself, okay, by acquiring additional knowledge through capacity building workshops, through trainings, through seminars, and also, finally, what is your level of cognitive flexibility? Okay, some people are adamant and they're fixated on one way of doing things. But if you're introduced to multiple ways of doing things, to what extent are you able to open up and embrace these new ways of thinking if it's in the overall interest of the organization? So what is your level of cognitive flexibility? These are some of the questions I want young people to begin to ask themselves, going forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Aina. Aimable, just briefly, maybe a minute. What do you think is the sustainable solution to this? Aimable, are you still there? Well, we may have lost Aimable, so I may take a few questions just for maybe a minute. So someone is asking, in Africa, university graduates struggle with getting a job despite their bachelor's degree. And I would like to ask, do any of the panelists think vocational schools could be the alternative path to employment? Could they share the view and some implementations the government can do to enhance or encourage people to pursue courses in vocational schools, including technical institutes and polytechnic schools? Gago or Aina, anyone who wants to take up on that?
I'll briefly comment. So from experience, I've interacted with people who've done STEM subjects. Myself, I've done a STEM subject, a combination of STEM and business. And I'll focus on engineering because engineering is a heavily practical subject. So I have friends who compare themselves with those they went to school with in high school, and some left the country, went to the UK, and others remained here and did an engineering course. So I'll give you a brief story. So this guy says, I did an engineering course, but I don't seem to, I really did not interact with a lot of engineering material in my schooling years. So I come to realize that whatever I really learned was heavily theoretical. My buddy who went to the UK, on the other hand, he tells me now that while they were exchanging to understand how his schooling years were, he came to realize that the guy, when he joined during his first year, he was put on projects all through to his fourth year. So by the time he was exiting campus, he had done more than 50 projects, real life 50 projects, whether it is research-based projects or campus-based projects. So when you observe across the continent, some of our educational institutions, because of bad governance in the country, we've experienced either outdated equipment that would facilitate STEM learning or vandalized facilities. So they leave us, those who seek education, to heavily depend on theoretical material as learning. And when you talk of, let's say, a motor for electrical engineering students, how often do you interact with motors at different levels of your schooling? And how often do you understand, let's say, an engine, how it works? And how often do you interact with, let's say, an aeroplane engine and how it works? By the time you're graduating as an electrical engineer out of school, you ought to have practically understood what it really means to service and maintain and also build an engine. So how often do we get opportunities to interact with these kind of things? The truth is very minimal. So we have turned STEM degrees into theoretical schooling sessions, and that does not make us productive after school. That is the beginning of a problem, or rather part of our problem. So there is also another aspect of people. There's a push for people to have degrees. Yes, degrees are good, but what skill do you derive from this degree? That is what is important, because if you come out with a degree and we put you on a job, or you given an opportunity to deliver, and what you claim to have does not tally with what you are able to do, then it will be very, very, very sorry for you, because you will not really last for long.
Okay. Thank you so much. And so I see a question on volunteerism. That was, I believe that was well addressed. And then someone mentioning about laziness. Well, we've agreed. We are not lazy. We are not lazy. So I think we've done this session justice, and I'd love just to give my panelists maybe a minute or 30 seconds each for them to give us their parting shots. I'll start with Dina, just 30 seconds.
Thank you very much once again. It's been a privilege and an honor to discuss and share with you all. I like to tell young people this, there are lots of challenges you're confronted with, okay? But do not give up, okay? Life is a process, okay? And for a long time, you've been told that you are the leaders of tomorrow, okay? But guess what? You are not just the leaders of tomorrow, you are today's leader in nation building and in national development. And whatever you desire for yourself and your country or your continent, Africa, is for you to birth. It's not for someone else to come do for you, okay? So do what is right, work hard, prioritize working hard over quick fix measures or shortcuts to life, and you have yourself to be thankful for in the coming future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Gago, 30 seconds, your parting shot.
I would encourage everyone who's here and those that are willing to pass the message out that self-confidence is a very key aspect of self-actualization. My observation is most of us as Africans, we don't seem to be very sure about ourselves. And we present ourselves to the global stage as a lesser people. We need to do away with that. Secondly, we treat each other in a manner that is not very encouraging compared to how others treat us. So we need to pull together, as I earlier mentioned. We need to love ourselves, and we also need to have some level of confidence that when Joyce has produced a product or invented a formula to produce a product, then we need to give Joyce a chance. Okay, that's how we build wealth together. Don't give your wealth away because you perceive that whatever is outside the continent is better than what is inside the continent. When you hand over your wealth away, you minimize the opportunity for your next door neighbor or for your friend to gain access to that wealth to recirculate back into the economy. So we need to find a way to keep the wealth that is created within ourselves to either be grown or be sustained amongst us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm not sure if Imable is around. Imable, are you there? Okay, if not, I'd love to say thank you so much to my panelists. Thank you so much for creating time and guiding us through this discussion. I believe this has been very productive and we've done it justice. And to our guests, thank you so much for creating time to join us. And personally, my parting shot, I'd say to my fellow youth, take opportunities, put yourself out there, learn, and always learn new skills. Don't limit yourselves with the certificates that you have. It doesn't matter what you studied. If you can have the skill, nowadays we have so many contents online. We can be able to make ourselves grow professionally. And again, let's be reliable. Let's have confidence. Let's, as Aina said, let's have negotiation skills out there. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to host this session. And right about now, I'd love to return the platform to Femi. Femi?
Thank you very much, Joyce, for moderating our session. Thank you very much to our speakers, and thank you so much to all the guests who have joined us today. Our session for today is over. Please join us tomorrow again at the same time as we begin 2 other sessions by 3 p.m. West African time, 4 p.m. Central African time, and 5 p.m. Eastern African time. Thank you so much, and bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. It was interesting and lively. Nice meeting all of us at LibertyCon Africa 20. Thanks, guys.